Welcome again to INLANDIA Literary Journeys. I'm John Bender, Metro Editor for the Press Enterprise. I'm here with Orlando Ramirez, Editor of La Prensa, and with May-lee Chai, author who has just moved here from San Francisco. She'll be the fiction coordinator for the MFA program at Cal State San Bernardino. And we're also joined by Katie Porter, Executive Director of the Inlandia Institute. Welcome, May.
Thank you.
I understand you have a new book about to come out.
I do, and I can hold it up since I have an advance copy. It's coming out in October, Tiger Girl, and it's actually set in the Inland Empire.
So, and which town is it set in?
I made a fictional town named Santa Bonita, and it's set outside San Bernardino, but it encompasses a lot of the culture and the kind of small business scene. It's set in a strip mall of the Inland Empire. So,
and, well, you were born here.
I was born here, yes.
However, you have traveled to, what, 14 different countries? What is...
I was born in Redlands,
okay.
And then we left when I was 6 for my father's job, and since then I've lived in 14 states and 4 countries, and it's been a long journey, but I'm finally back, so I feel very happy.
Well, welcome home.
Thank you.
Tell us about your book. It's the second in a series?
It is. The first book, Dragon Chica, is about this Sino-Cambodian family that survived the Khmer Rouge, and they get sponsored to America by a small Baptist church in Texas. And then they find relatives and reunite in Nebraska, where they open this small town's first Chinese restaurant. And the whole title, Dragon Chica, comes from this idea of what is American culture. And so I'm mixing English and Spanish, Asian references, and putting it all together, because that's my idea of what American culture is, this mix. But when they go to the small town, some of the people there don't have that same idea, and so there's some tension about the new immigrants changing the culture of the town. And then the sequel, Tiger Girl, is set here in the Inland Empire, and it's no longer about the anxiety of the mix, because it has all the mix. I mean, you've got this Chinese-Cambodian man running a donut shop. He employs people of different races. His best friend is the Mexican-American priest, and I felt like that really reflects the culture here. Mm-hmm. It's very hybrid. But the anxiety comes from what makes a family. How do you reconstitute yourself after war, after loss? And the main character, Nia, is coming here to find her biological father. They were separated because of the war, and when they were reunited previously in Nebraska, her father refused to acknowledge her and didn't say that he was her father. So she tracks him down to his donut shop and is going to confront him and find out, finally, once and for all, what is the truth, what has happened, what is family.
How did he identify himself to her the first time?
She thought he was her uncle.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've found interesting just reading about your life and your career is that you spend quite a bit of time in China.
Yes.
How was that in helping you form your sense of who you are as a writer, and how did that come out in your writing?
China was really, just instrumental for me in so many ways. I still go back and forth to China. I love China, and it's been really interesting to see all the changes. And I've written books about this as well. My father's family immigrated to America in 1950, but his parents had actually come to school in America in the 1930s and then gone back, and then suffered through the Civil War, the Sino-Japanese War, and then finally made it back to the United States. And my father met my mother here and in Redlands. And so it's been a long journey. But then after we left Redlands, our family encountered some difficulties. My mother's white. She's a longtime Redlands resident, and they got married in 1966, which was the year that the Supreme Court ruled that all the anti-miscegenation laws in America were illegal in Loving versus Virginia. Actually, it was the next year, 67, that was decided. So in California, it wasn't that big a deal to have a mixed marriage. There were some people, Redlands was more conservative in those days, and there were some people saying, oh, I hope you don't have children. You know, oh, what will the children do? But, you know, there wasn't violence or anything. So my father's an academic, so we moved to different parts of the country. We lived in New York City area for 6 years. That, again, no problem. In New York, you'd have to have like a third arm before people would even look at you twice, right? But then we moved to rural South Dakota. And we moved to a very, very small town where people believed that mixed race people were against God's intentions. And they thought we were a sign of the coming apocalypse when the Antichrist would reign on earth. And so people would shoot at our house. We had 5 of our dogs shot over the years.
Oh, no.
As a child, we moved there when I was 12, people would come up to me and to my face and said, you know, I was against God's will. God had put the different races on different continents for a purpose. It was to keep them separated. So it was a very, very traumatic adolescence, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a book about
Dakota?
South Dakota, back in the 80s. So you said you had a traumatic 80s. I had a traumatic 80s as well. And so after that experience, I felt traumatized, and at 18, I just wasn't sure where I fit on this earth, and I went to China for the first time with my father. He had a family reunion. For many, many years, China was closed to people, and it just opened up in '79 when the U.S. and China reestablished diplomatic relations. And so we went in '85. That was our first big family reunion. All up from 1950 to '85, he hadn't seen his mother's family at all. So we went together and we met the family that had been separated by war. And it really just opened up the world to me. I could see a completely different, opposite experience of South Dakota. And China in the 80s was just very intellectually fascinating. They wanted to be open to the world. They had been closed under Mao, but now they were opening up under Deng Xiaoping, and they wanted ties with the world. People were very curious, people were very friendly, and I thought it was a very healing experience. And so I've been going back and forth to China ever since.
And what were those books? The name for those?
Well, the one that talks specifically about South Dakota is called Hoppa Girl, and it actually opens in Redlands. And people have said, oh, you know, the opening is so sweet, and it seems kind of, you know, very simple and paradisical. And I said, it was, you know, and relatively
Right.
speaking, it was. And then my father and I co-wrote a family memoir called The Girl from Purple Mountain. And that is about my grandmother and how she basically saved the family during World War II and kept them alive, because they're from Nanjing.
Uh-huh.
And of course, my father was 5 years old when the rape of Nanking, as it's known in English, occurred. And she was the one who kept the family moving and kept them together and saved them from first the Sino-Japanese War and then the Civil War, and helped them to come to the United States, where they found safe haven. And so that is the story of her life. And it was another thing that was kind of haunting, because when I was 13, she died very unexpectedly. And we discovered that she had secretly changed her will so that she would be buried alone, rather than in the plots that she and my grandfather had bought together years ago. And no one in the family would talk about it. It just was so upsetting to everyone. My grandfather complied with her wishes. I mean, they'd been married for 50 years by that point, and we thought, you know, they were very close, they were very loving. Sure, they argued, but, you know, you didn't expect this. And then no one would talk about it. They'd say, no, we can't talk about it, can't talk about it. She just went crazy, she just went crazy. I'm like, well, that, you know, she wasn't crazy. So The Girl from Purple Mountain is also my attempt to kind of piece together these family stories and find out, why did my grandmother want to be buried alone? And why did my grandfather comply with her wishes after she died? And what kind of message were they communicating and sending to each other through this kind of last act?
I love the idea of that memoir as excavating family history, and you know, it really does tell a story in the same way good memoir does, the same way that fiction does, and it takes us on a journey. And I loved what you said too about this whole area being very hybridized. You know, I've grown up in Southern California. It feels very much that way to me. And it's just coincidence that last week our guest was also someone of mixed heritage. She was Iranian and American?
Yes, she's
and
American.
She grew up in
American as well.
Pomona.
Okay. And she talked about how that affected her sense of belonging anywhere. Has that affected you at all? Your fitting in?
I mean, I had such a dramatic childhood and adolescence with the, kind of the violence, living in odd places. But I feel like it's such an advantage when you have a dual culture or a bicultural background. And so, I mean, it's given me insight, I feel, into other cultures because I can't fully be one thing or the other. So I can kind of see a different perspective wherever I am. And when I'm down here, in Southern California, in the Inland Empire, it's so common that I don't have to feel other, but I can kind of see the examples of hybrid identity and hybrid culture everywhere. Even if you are, just one race, you're not necessarily a mixed race. You know people. You probably have cousins or family or somebody who's this mixed culture. And we can feel like every day we're creating a new culture. And I feel like it's that way. All the changes that are happening in the world of globalization and with the cultural changes are not threatening to us. We can feel like we're actively participating in that. And I feel like having a mixed background kind of gave me a step up on that and how to frame and see these changes. Because there is anxiety, and there are pundits. Like remember Lou Dobbs in the past decade, and Lou Dobbs on CNN back in the day, he was going on about the Mexican invasion of America and all these illegal Mexicans. It's like, Lou, half of our states have Spanish names. I mean, there's no new Mexican invasion. We've always been this hybrid culture. But he found it clearly very alarming. And I mean, I don't have to be like him, because I don't find it alarming. I find it normal.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back to the inland area.
Thank you.
May-lee.
Well, this has been another edition of Inlandia Journeys. Be sure to look for the column that runs every week in the Press Enterprise on Tuesdays. Be sure to visit the blog that is available through pe.com. And we will see you next week. Thank you.